The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday, January 31st, indeed, the second show of the day. Glad to have many of you back, and some of you listening for the first time today, maybe some of you listening for the first time ever, so thanks for joining us. We've got a pretty rowdy show today. We're going to be talking about Andrew Tate, the whole issue of masculinity, kind of Matt Walsh's response to Andrew Tate and to the popularity of Andrew Tate, and his version of masculinity. And we're going to throw up our hands and say, what the hell, the world's insane. I mean, all the alternatives that are presented by the popular voices in the culture are all false. And that is the biggest challenge we face in the world in which we live. I'm going to leave the headphones on because I've got a bunch of videos I'm going to show you. Let's see, what do I want to say before we get started? Yeah, I'm doing this partially because I think I wasn't hard enough hitting on Andrew Tate before. I want to do this scumbag justice. And I'm not sure even I can do him justice. I think to do him justice, some of you just gonna have to go watch his videos and see for yourself. But I think I'll give you a little sputtering of indication of how bad this guy is. And what a awful influence he is on young people out there in the world. So I want to do that. I want, just for the sake of justice, I've talked about Andrew Tate, but I just didn't think I went far enough. I didn't have enough information. I didn't know enough about him, so I've done a little bit of research. I've watched some of his videos. I've read some articles. I've read some of his tweets. I've done all this stuff. Only for that, just for that, I don't know, I should get combat pay or something, risk adjusted, because yeah, it's pretty disgusting stuff. And then I thought it was interesting. Okay, so he has a particular vision of masculinity that we will see, that we will, we won't really see directly. We'll see indirectly through his behavior and through what he says, because often he says things that are much better than what actually it all means. I'm curious about what then is the response by people, and I'm less interested in the response from the left, because the response to the left is basically anti-masculinity. It's basically to reject masculinity more broadly, toxic masculinity. There is no such thing as the masculine, or to reject the male generally. So the response on the left is less interesting. What really is interesting. What really is interesting is the response on the right. So what we'll watch is, because really the debate here is around masculinity, really is happening, the positive debate on masculinity, that is, if masculinity is a positive thing, masculinity is something to be achieved, is really, that debate is really happening on the right, and it's happening between the likes of Andrew Tate and the likes of Matt Walsh, with a variety. And then I will give you my take. Again, I'm not an expert on masculinity. If you're interested in we can ask Gina Gorlin on Thursday what she thinks about masculinity. But anyway, I'll give you my take on masculinity. In contrast, and the Matt Walsh video, both of these, actually, both the Andrew Tate and the Matt Walsh, illustrate a deeper and wider point about self-interest and about selfishness, because one of Matt Walsh's criticism of Andrew Tate, and Matt Walsh, is very much opposed to Andrew Tate for many of the same reasons I am. So the reasons we reject Andrew Tate are very somewhat similar. But then Matt Walsh, as we'll see, ascribes selfishness to Andrew Tate. He ascribes self-interest to Andrew Tate, and proposes his alternative, which is the opposite of self-interest. So it is it is a good opportunity to discuss kind of the whole issue of self-interest, selfishness, the whole issue of masculinity, the whole issue of pursuing your values and what it means and what it is, and this is a you know, an interesting plus very much topic, very much in the culture. I did think that putting Andrew Tate in the title and Matt Walsh in the title together would generate a lot of views, so that's interesting. That there would be a lot of people also watching live, but we will see. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm late to the topic. Maybe 2 weeks ago would have been better, but you know, I have to do research. That's the sucky thing about this, right? I actually have to know what I'm talking about. But I'm hoping that this video will be watched by many people because it is an opportunity. How am I streaming on this thing? God, all right, I'm just gonna kill this channel. Remove channel. All right, it's gone. It is not part of my thing. I can't do it anymore. I have no idea how it streams. It's not intentional, so I have no idea how that happened. Because I've got it literally off. The button in YouTube is set to off. Do not stream on that channel, and it still streams on that channel. So what's the point of having a toggle on-off button when it doesn't work and when everything is on, no matter what you do? Anyway, generally, Matt Walsh is a real source of good content on the right and what the right thinks and where the right positions itself. He is massive in terms of his YouTube channel. Is I think got over 2 million subscribers. And he is part of Ben Shapiro's network, massive influence on the right, and so he's good to listen to. He's good to review, and what you'll see today is some of his more tame videos. We will be discussing some other videos of his where he's a little bit more. What is the term? Michael says fascist. Yeah, more tyrannical. And irrational, but we'll talk about all of that. So okay, that's the plan for today. We'll watch some Andrew Tate videos. We'll watch some Matt Walsh videos. I'll read you some quotes because I don't want to put too much videos of Andrew Tate in particular. I find it pretty disgusting and despicable. So I'll read you some quotes from him. Although I'm sure people will say I'm taking him out of context, but they'll do that with the video as well. I'm hoping this convinced some people. I mean, you know, who knows? The reality is that last time I did a video on Andrew Tate, the comment on it were pretty horrific. So maybe there's just no hope in convincing people about a topic that they're not interested in being convinced about. So we will see. We will see. All right. Just generally, as you all know, we fund these shows with monthly contributions. You can do a monthly contribution. I encourage you to do so and support this show on Patreon, on Subscribestar, or on yaronbrookshow.com/support. You know, but you can also, in a fun way, if you're listening live, for those of you live, you can support the show by using the Super Chat, ask questions, interact with me, and also you can. Just support the show by using one of those stickers. You can also become a member of the Yaron Brook Show on YouTube, and by gaining a membership, you will participate in member-only shows. I somehow skipped January for the member-only shows. I should have probably done it tonight, but I'll try to make that up for you. But I will be doing a members-only show in February. So stay tuned for that soon. The members-only show in February will be soon because February we're going to run out of February almost as fast as we started because I start traveling on the 18th of February. So we'll see how that goes, but we will be. You can sign up as a member of YouTube, of the channel on YouTube. And there are lots of other ways in which you can support us, Venmo and PayPal and just a million ways. I appreciate with record numbers of supporters, or at least record numbers of different channels. So keep it up. Thank you. And yeah, you know, we want to grow this channel. We want to grow what we do. You're seeing a lot more videos. You see, we're producing a lot more videos on the channel. That's part of this growth. We want it to be even faster. And your support helps with all of that. Plus, it's just value for value. I'm doing stuff. You obviously consume it. You obviously value it somewhat. All right, enough of all that. Let's get into it. So Andrew Tate, as you all know, is this character, almost cartoonish character, who really represents this attitude towards masculinity and towards strength and towards what it means to be a man, which basically is, you know, the conventional, but it almost turned into caricature because he really is somewhat of a caricature. The idea of a masculine man is somebody who works out a lot, is in great shape, is you know, if you work the body and you get the body in great shape, supposedly your mind follows. It is somebody who can get any woman he wants, and he only wants beautiful, attractive women, because that all that matters, after all, is how we look. He wants, he sleeps with, he has sex with many of them. Why pick and choose when you can have access to so many women? Sex is what drives him. He is successful at making money, although how he makes money and the means by which money is made doesn't really matter. It's not about the activity of production. It is about the money that it generates, and then it's about ability to consume that money. It is about having fancy cars and fancy toys and fancy homes. Andrew Tate represents a purely unadulterated and, I think, unbelievably corrupt, materialistic view of man. There is no spiritual dimension. There is no soul. There is no consciousness. There is no, for that matter, intelligence. None of those things matter. The only thing that matters is material superiority of strength, physical strength, material superiority in getting women, and the more, the better. And the material view that the value of women only is constituted in the sex they can provide the male, maybe that they provide them with children. But there is no value. There is no value in the relationship. There is no value in the woman's intelligence. There is no value in the woman, qua human being, but only as a instrument of sex, and only as an instrument of procreation. This is pure, barbaric, ancient, materialism. And it's indeed quite shocking that so many of the right, on the right, have so many good things to say about Andrew Tate. I mean, even if they're going to condemn him, they start out by praising him, because even those on the right who don't like Andrew Tate, there's something about him that they're jealous of. They love. I mean, here's somebody I respect whose article on Andrew Tate is quite good. John Hawkins, who writes the culturecitadel.com, which is a Substack, and I recommend it, and he often has insightful things to say. He's a little bit too much of a Trumpist, but other than that, you know, he's pretty good. But here's what he wrote. Want to know my initial impression of Andrew Tate? None of which I'll take back today. He's a strong, smart, good-looking, highly intelligent, very charismatic, cool, wealthy, marketing genius who's extraordinarily good with women. I mean, that is so bizarre. That is so bizarre. Just take the final point. Extraordinarily good with women. Which women? Women of value? Women you would want? Women that you desire? Not me. No man of self-esteem wants the kind of women that Andrew Tate wants. Andrew Tate is exactly the kind of person that Ayn Rand talks about having gratuitous, lots of sex as an empty attempt to gain his own self-esteem. Andrew Tate is cool. By what measure of coolness? What does being cool mean? Yes, he is wealthy. Yes, he's probably good at marketing. He's figured this out. He is very charismatic, highly intelligent. I'm skeptical. Skeptical. He's manipulative. He knows people. He knows how to manipulate people to the extent that people manipulation requires intelligence. Maybe he's intelligent. Is he good looking? I don't know. Maybe the women in the room could tell me. I'm not very good at these things. He's strong. Yeah, I mean, he was a kickboxer, world champion kickboxer. He's definitely strong. No question about that. Smart, highly intelligent and smart. But the really extraordinary thing is he's extraordinarily good with women. I mean, it tells you so much about the person writing this. There is a certain jealousy there. Is he cool? Again, by what standard? So, what women? What women attracted to this guy? I guarantee you my wife is not. The one woman I actually want is not attracted to him. So, extraordinarily good with sluts, extraordinarily good with dumb women, extraordinarily good with pathetic women, extraordinarily good with easily manipulable women, extraordinarily good with fill in the blank, but not desirable women, not, to use their language, quality women. Now, to John Hawkins' credit, he goes on to criticize and call Andrew Tate the kind of and identify him and illustrate the fact that Andrew Tate is nothing but a real scumbag. But that's how he describes him, and he says he wouldn't take any of that back. Here's an example, and in the story that John Hawkins presents, he gives all the details. This is a story that Andrew Tate tells about himself, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, partially because it's just, he tells it in a series of tweets. This is an account that I think is now defunct called Tate's Speech, where he tells the whole story of his seduction of this woman. I'm going to summarize it for you quickly, actually in John Hawkins's terminology. This is what Andrew Tate tells in this tweet. He tells the story that he met a woman in London, seduced her, falsely made her think the two of them might have a future together, and convinced her to move back to Romania. I've read all the tweets. None of this is an exaggeration. This is exactly right. When her mother smells BS, Tate had a conversation with her and convinced her that he really, truly cared about her daughter. Then, after this woman quit her job and moved for him, she finds out he's already in a relationship and her only option is to be part of a threesome. Didn't tell her in advance about any of this. After doing this for a while, the threesome thing, she starts to suspect, finally, that Tate cares nothing about her and asks for some proof. Note the things Tate says she wanted. She wanted to get married. She wanted to have a baby. Clearly, this is someone who, for unfathomable reasons, given the circumstances, is actually being snookered into believing that Andrew Tate is someone who may very well want to spend the rest of his life with her. So he tells this naive woman that he'll prove he's serious if she tattoos his name on her body. Can you imagine any woman that you, I'm talking to the men right now, any woman that you, as a man, would desire who would fall for any of this crap? Now, John Hawkins, as an aside, puts, incidentally, I don't know how many women have these tattoos, but Tate has openly said that there are more than 20 women with tats like this on their bodies. Doesn't that tell you everything you need about Andrew Tate? That he requires women to put their name? So apparently, it's something he gets off on convincing women to do. And I mean, there's a man of self-esteem. Talk about narcissism. In any case, she gets a tattoo. And by his own admission, Tate did nothing to show he was serious about her because He's not. He's just leading her on. So he's just nothing. This comes to a head when he leaves town. She gets mad at him, disobeys him. This is Tate's word. She disobeyed me. Disobeys him by going to a festival, and Tate retaliates by never talking to her again. Tate would tell you those were just boundaries. Boundaries? Maybe between a master and a slave, or a serial killer and someone stuck in a hole in their basement. These are appropriate boundaries. But what he is talking about here is unhealthy to the point of being bizarre among human beings in a relationship. Look, that was me reading from John Hawkins' article where he gives the actual tweets. You can actually go and read this. And I encourage you to, go check out John Hawkins. Andrew Tate is I don't want to call him any psychological term because I don't know what he is technically, although he is clearly a narcissist. But he is a sick human being. He is not a model of manhood. He is not a model of masculinity. He is a model of somebody who should not be allowed to be anywhere near women. Well, not be allowed socially, I'm not arguing. Although, as you probably know, he's been arrested on claims of raping women and basically forcing women to work for him in his, what do you call it? Video webcam porn service, right? He and his brother and 2 Romanian women. I mean, this is a man who makes money off of porn. But I'm sure there are better people who make money off of porn than this scumbag. Yes, he's super rich, making money off of porn. There's a productive endeavor for you, a virtuous endeavor, one that represents real. In a now deleted video on Tate's YouTube channel, he explained that, by the way, he moved to Romania. He lives in Romania. This is where also he's been arrested. He says in this deleted video, he's trying to explain why he moved to Romania, and part of the reason he moved to Romania is because they have less harsh laws about rape in Romania. He says, quote, "This is probably 40% of the reason I moved to Romania. I'm not a fucking rapist, but I like the idea of just being able to do what I want. I like being free. Free to rape." He said men living in any Western country have decided to live somewhere that any woman at any point in the future can destroy their lives. Now, this is true. But this is a consequence of non-objective laws. This is a consequence of the demonization of men. This is yes, the left and the culture is terrible on men, is terrible on masculinity. But the alternative is not a culture of rape or a culture forgiving of rape. By the way, somebody says never trust a single word Romanian law enforcement says. I'm not reading law enforcement, I'm reading Tate. And by the way, in this case, I think law enforcement in Romania are probably 100% right. We'll see as it goes through the legal system. But everything about this man's behavior suggests that he cons women by having sex with them. I'll tell you in a minute. I'll show you in a minute, right? Tate says he loves corruption. He loves corrupt regimes. This is why he moved to Romania. He says, I like Eastern Europe as a whole because corruption is far more accessible. I find it offensive that a police officer in England will stop me and refuse to take a bribe. Wow. Then, of course, he said about rape, about women, if you put yourself in a position to be raped, you must bear some responsibility. I'm not saying it's okay to you got raped. No woman should be abused regardless. However, with sexual assault, they want to put zero blame on the victim whatsoever. He then compared women to leaving a, quote, $1 million outside my front door saying that he had no sympathy for women who went out and drank alcohol, then got sexually assaulted. Really? Take some personal responsibility, he said. This zero blame game is damaging to the female cause as a whole. Protect yourself. All right, let's see. So with regard to these women working for him, this is the case that the Romanians are making, right? Here's how he describes how he recruits people to work for him. He says, first of all, 50% of his employees, the people who work in the porn business for him, 50% of the employees were his girlfriend at one point. Quote, none were in the adult entertainment industry before they met me. He then explains how he gets them. He says, my job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test if she's qualified, get her to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I say, and then get her on webcam so we could become rich together. Tate said that if you want to go into a business like this, he's instructing young men in how to start a business like this. He said, you have to have sex with the women you employ. Quote, you cannot sit and do a purely professional business relationship with a female. It doesn't work. If you're not fucking the girl, she is fucking someone else. And that other person she's fucking is going to have a control over her mind as opposed to you. Women who have control over their mind. They don't have a mind of themselves, notice. Anyway, whether the Romanians have a case against him or not, he basically, in his own words, has declared himself guilty. This is exactly what he does. You know, how does he use women to recruit other women? I'm going to find the girl, and I'm going to bring her to you, and you're going to tell her how good it is to work for me, and how great it is to be a webcamming thing, and how smart we are. He said he would go on dates with women for the sole purpose of getting them to start making content for his webcam business. I don't mention webcam until I've had sex with the girl. And then she falls in love with him and she'll do anything he says. Now, he also doesn't allow women to leave his home. This was in that long tweet he describes, but he's also said this in other places. Quote, I'm all over the place, so I end up with all these chicks just stuck in the house, sitting there bored, completely in love with me. And of course, they don't go out. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to. He said people might assume the women can go out with their friends when he's not there, but that was wrong. You don't go to the club with your friends. I don't know what kind of bitch-ass dude is letting his chicks go to clubs without him. No, you stay at house, in the house. You don't go anywhere. No restaurants, no clubs, nothing. This is a man? This is masculine? This is the most horrible, barbaric, primitive animal. This is not a man. He's not deserving of the title man. He's certainly not deserving of the title masculine. He's just a sick human being. And any woman who follows this guy is sick. And of course, he is the kind of man who believes it's all about force. All about force. Force makes right. Might makes right. You don't believe me? So here's a short video. Here's a short video of, and you can see how good looking this guy is. It's a short video. It's one of those short videos on YouTube, so it's long, so that's why it's kind of funny in the frame. But hopefully you can see that. And let me see if I can play this, and you can see for yourself. This is the guy millions and millions and millions of young men admire and respect and want to learn from and want advice from. This is the symbol of masculine men, and this is primarily on the right. This is the right. Now we'll get to why this is in a minute, but let's. This is the kind of human being that so many people love and respect. And we have somebody in the chat who's Yaron still lives in the past. It's 2013 in the age of OnlyFans. You cannot let women go out alone with her friends. You're a barbarian if you think that. And no, you'll never get a decent woman. You'll never get a decent woman. If you don't trust your woman to go to a club by herself or to a restaurant by herself, you don't deserve a decent woman, and you'll never get a decent woman. This is exactly the kind of mentality that will guarantee you being either alone or alone. And you know, pathetic. Just absolutely pathetic. I don't care what year it is. I mean, the only reason not to let a woman go alone somewhere like that is for her safety. But we live in a fairly safe society. I don't think that is the consideration. Here's Andrew Tate on might makes right.
Seriously, who was right about 2 + 2? You're smart, I'm stupid. We decide to argue. You say 2 + 2 is 4, I say 2 + 2 is 5. You continue to say it's 4, I continue to say it's 5 until I'm enraged. Now that I'm enraged, I've decided to rip your arms from your body. You say, no, it's still 4. I destroy you. Left hook, your chin snaps, your head hits the floor, and you die. Who was right? Seriously, who was right about 2 + 2?
Yeah, who was right, guys? Who was right? Oh, God. Yes, I live in the past because I don't let the past is where you don't let your woman go anywhere. Since when do why should women listen to you? Who the hell are you to tell your woman whether she can go out or not? You guys are nuts. And note that they're here, right here on the chat. I'm not making these people up. Now, you just saw Andrew Tate tell you that 2 + 2 = 5 because he's stronger than you. He can rip your arms out. He can kill you. And therefore, 2 + 2 = whatever he says it is. This is a guy anybody should follow. This is a guy anybody should listen to anything he says. Now, what I find interesting about this is what happens to a guy like this. Where does he go for his belief system? And what is really interesting here is that there are rumors that he converted to Islam late last year. I don't know if those rumors are true. There's a bunch of videos showing it. But I did find this video where he is raving about the Muslim world, not just the Muslim world, Islam. And I want you to watch this because this is exactly right. This is what Andrew Tate is. He is a throwback to a primitive world of Islam, a primitive world of pre-civilization, a primitive world of pre-civilization, whether it's Islam or any other religion. In this world, right now, what represents that attitude towards women? What represents that brutality of force? Well, it's Islam. So I want to show you this quick video of Andrew Tate talking about the Muslim world. I mean, I won't show you the whole thing. You can find it on YouTube. It's Christian kickboxing champion praises Islam. This is Andrew Tate. You can find the YouTube video. You can watch the whole thing. I'm just going to show you a little bit. He's talking here about the fact that he loves Qatar. Qatar.
You can go to Qatar. You can fall asleep with $1 million on your lap in the middle of the street. Nothing's going to happen to you.
Saudi Arabia.
That's also true, by the way, of South Korea and Japan. I wonder if he's as praiseworthy as that. By the way, but the difference is that in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the reason is that the punishment for touching that $1 million is so severe that, yeah, people are scared and people are really, really afraid.
Nothing will happen to you. You can go to Dubai, UAE, nothing's going to happen to you.
They leave their cars parked with the
These are the standards.
inside.
It's so safe.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It's so safe. Women, everyone's married. Every woman obeys her husband. Every single woman has 4 or 5.
Every woman obeys her husband. That's the standard. I don't know. There are a few women listening to the show. I think my wife might be. Gail, you got to learn from this. You got to obey your husband. Tessie's here, and I'm sure, and all you women out there, Jennifer's there. You got to just obey your husband and 4, 5, or 6 kids. That's a necessity.
5, 6 kids, big families, all.
You know what big families means in Islam? He doesn't mention this, but you know what big families mean in Islam? It means multiple wives. Multiple wives. So it's not just big family, multiple wives, lots of kids, and women obeying their husbands. This is, what could be better than Muslim world? Really. And the amazing thing is, everything he's talking about is life pre-civilization. And yet, he's the darling of millions of kids, and is the darling on the right. Candace Owen is a big defender of this guy. Candace Owen. She loves him. She thinks, oh, what the Romanians are accusing him of, none of that is true. He's such a nice guy. He's a great guy. Great guy.
All the things we're talking about, all the problems we have here, right? They've got none of that.
None of that in Islam. Yep.
Because of
There's
Islam.
no left in
Islam
Islam.
keeps society in the role where women obey their man.
Women obey their men.
Have children. Women have big families. Women are exceptionally happy to do so.
Yeah.
You've heard of all the happy women in Saudi Arabia and all the happy women in Qatar and all the happy women in the UAE? Really? I mean, happy? I mean, maybe men like Tate are pseudo-happy, but women are happy in these countries? God, I mean, the audacity of claiming this nonsense. And this is the American right today. Women are happy when they obey. Women are happy when they shut up and have kids.
Before some Western girl comes in here and runs her mouth, the Islamic women are happier than any you're going to see in the club tonight.
They're very true.
They're happy. Society is functioning. Their population is growing, because in most Western countries, the population is declining.
Yep. Tim Cass was talking about it today. I was talking. We were
Two
showed it on
people
the
have
boat.
one
Yeah.
kid. Doesn't work. Doesn't work, right? Two people need to have 3.1 kids.
He doesn't even know the math. 3.1 kids. They need 2.1 kids, not 3.1. You
People die,
idiot.
right? People die
Idiot on top
prematurely,
of
blah,
that.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So we have population problems in the West. They have none of the population problems. Society is functioning. And that's what society is. Society is...
All right, enough of him. Society is functioning. It's functioning. This is great. They're having kids. They're obeying their husbands. They're, quote, happy. What could go wrong? I mean, society is just cruising along there. It is wonderful. It is fantastic. So, why is Andrew Tate so successful? I mean, he has a gazillion more followers than I do. He has a lot of young men. I don't. I mean, I have you guys. There are some young men there. But he's super successful. Why is that? Well, and why does the right love him so much? Well, first, the right loves him because he's anti-left. He hates the left. He hates the whole feminized, feminist, anti-man, anti-masculinity left. So they love him because, yeah, we'll have an ally. We'll align ourselves with anybody who's anti-left. Where are all my followers who usually are on the show and tell me how evil the left is? And we should align with anybody to take over the left. And, well, how many of you want to align yourself with Andrew Tate? He is also talking about a real problem in our society. And that is that men are attacked for their strengths, for their dynamism. Men are attacked for being successful. Success is despised. We live in a culture in which, success generally is denigrated. But where women are on the rise, have been for 20, 30, 40 years. Women are on the rise because they were held back for so long, and more importantly, I think, because the changes in technology, the changes in our economy, make it possible for women to do as well as men, and for some women much better than the men around them, because we're becoming more and more and more of a society, I've talked about this before, that relies on the mind, not on physical strength, to produce. And the more society relies on the mind, the more women can do the same job men can do, and some women can do it better than some men. It is not rare anymore that women make more money than men. And if you don't have self-esteem, that really bothers you. If you don't have self-esteem, that's unthinkable to you. We live in a society that women can live, don't need a man to protect themselves. They can buy a gun. We live in a society in which women can be heads of corporations, they can run businesses, they can run pretty much everything. Because our societies have become more and more reliant on brain versus muscle. A world of muscle is a world of men. And the world has shifted from muscle to brain, which is a good thing because fundamentally what makes us human is our mind, not our brawn. And as we've shifted from muscle to brain, from reliance on muscle, from reliance on strength, from reliance on the physical, to brain, women have become man's equal. Men's equal. And men don't know how to handle it. Men with low self-esteem are afraid of women. They're afraid of strong women. They're afraid of women who are as smart or smarter than them. They're afraid of strong-willed women. They're afraid of women who can earn more than them, who gain more respect than them. God, today's going to be a long show. I haven't even gotten to Matt Walsh, and I've got like 500 super chat questions. How about we only, because we got so many questions, we only do $20 questions or above for the rest of tonight. And if anybody can do $100 questions, that'd be good. But yeah, this is going to be long. So it needs to be rewarding. So only $20 questions from now on because it's going to be a while. I mean, what Andrew Tate is leveraging is a disrespect for the human mind. By the way, he's leveraging the same stuff as what was it, Bronze Age perverts and anybody who's focused on the material, focused on the physical, focused on the mindless. There's a reason why he calls himself Bronze Age. It's the age of muscle. It's the age of force. It's the age of coercion. And it's an age where women did what men told them, or they'd have their throats slit. We live in an age where women don't have to do what men tell them. Why? Because we live in an age where the mind matters, not muscle. And as such, our conception of masculinity has to adapt. It's not enough for us to be strong as men, to be masculine, to go out and protect. It's good to be strong. You should be in shape. But so should women. We should all be strong. We should all have some muscle. You could argue maybe it's more important to men, maybe for men. But it doesn't matter that much. Not in a sense of how you're going to make a living. Not in a sense of actually being able to protect. Not in a sense of actually succeeding in life. No, guys. The thing is about you guys are out of touch. You guys are out of touch. The people who think Andrew Tate has any clue are out of touch. Because you're out of touch with what it means to be successful in the world in which we're in. You're out of touch with what it means to live a successful life in the world in which we live. You're out of touch on what it means to live a happy life. Whatever the dating dynamic of the 21st century, it cannot be that the standard is wanting to sleep with as many women as you want, manipulating them, demanding that they obey you, seeking money any way you can so that you can have material goodies. It doesn't matter what the dating environment is. It doesn't matter what women, what the reality is. Well, women choose the men. So what? Why is that a bad thing if women choose the man? She can't force you, so you have to choose her as well. It doesn't work like that anymore. No, it's exactly how it works. Andrew Tate is how it worked 300 years ago. And it shouldn't work that way. It should never work that way. You want a woman, you have to earn a woman. You have to be good enough for a woman. It's not true that women has always chosen the man. That's not true, MH. But the problem is that you guys don't live in the modern world. You guys want to hang on to some weird view of the past. Yeah, it's definitely a bad thing to sleep around. It's definitely not a good thing, certainly not a masculine thing, to just sleep around. And it's certainly not going to get you a happy, successful life. It's certainly not something you will be rewarded for when you're older, that you will reward yourself for when you're older. And if you have the attitude that women should obey you, then thank God women won't date you, because you don't deserve a date. If you have an attitude that Andrew Tate is a model for anything, then you don't deserve them. Yes, the dating environment in the 21st century is different. Yes, the dating environment in the 21st century is very difficult. I get all that. But that's your responsibility to figure it out. Your responsibility to find the right woman. Your responsibility to find a woman that you deserve and who deserves you. The standard of good is not sleeping around with a bunch of pretty girls. Never has been. I mean, it is for Andrew Tate. I mean, Andrew Tate tweeted, where's that tweet? I have this tweet of Andrew Tate. Let's see. Whoops, it's not there. All right, maybe it's disappeared. No, there it is. Here's Andrew Tate's standard for masculinity, for success. Genghis Khan had endless women and 200 children as a reward for conquest. Yes, there's the standard. Genghis Khan is the standard for the modern man. We should all seek to be like Genghis Khan, the barbarian. I am the most searched man on the planet. This is Andrew Tate, not me. I have conquered Earth. I am the highest status male on the planet. Females do not expect loyalty from me. They only expect that of a lesser man. Really. The females you attract, Andrew Tate, which are... You got to be kidding me. All right, and this is the problem that men face. They face Andrew Tate on the one side, the left on the other side, and on the third side, the side that seems to be, rejecting the left, but also rejects Andrew Tate, is Matt Walsh. So let's take a look at what Matt Walsh thinks the essence of masculinity is and what its appeal is, right? And we'll see that this is the false dichotomy, the false presentation. It's the same thing that Ben Shapiro does. It's all, this materialism. If you don't have materialism, what do you need? Well, you need religion. He won't mention religion here, but it's implied. It's all underneath. It's either materialism or religion. Those are the two options in life. And I understand that if those are the two options in life, you might want to choose. I don't know. I think if those are the two options in life, it might be time for suicide, to consider suicide. Men like Andrew Tate get the hottest women, and regular men today enjoy their fat whales, really. You have no clue whoever wrote that. You have no clue what, he doesn't get the hottest woman, he gets the dumbest woman. He doesn't get the hottest woman, he gets the women who are most easy to manipulate. You want a really hot woman? Is a good-looking woman with brains, and he doesn't get a single one of those. But those are the ones that a good human being, a good man, a masculine man, properly understood, those are the kind of women you should seek. A woman with a character, a woman with a mind, a woman with a brain. That's what you want. But not if you're a pure materialist. Not if you think it's just about life. And he's pathetic. He has no self-esteem. Everything, he believes in muscle. He's a barbarian. And barbarians have no self-esteem because if human life requires reason, and if they cannot, not in the world, this is the problem today. This is why they're so confused today. What they're confused about today is the fact that they used to be the dominant men, because in a world of muscle, they were the top of the heap, and today they're not. Today, people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. You ever see that documentary called, what was it, The Revenge of the Nerds? It's the nerds that are at the top. Andrew Tate has no self-esteem. No self-esteem at all. Ultimately, he hates himself. Yes, I absolutely believe that. People who emphasize the material, who emphasize force, who sleep around. No, that is not a lie. He has no self-esteem. If you understand what self-esteem is, he has none of it. Self-esteem comes from using this to achieve your values, not being a little child. Materialism is not self-esteem. Lashing out in the way he does is not self-esteem. Saying 2 + 2 = whatever I say it is because I'm strong is not representative of self-esteem. Self-esteem is knowing you belong on this earth because you know you can use your mind. He doesn't have that because he can't. He can use his mind to manipulate. He can use his mind to manipulate people. He can't use his mind to actually change the world, to actually have an impact on the world. Read the definition of self-esteem. Andrew Tate does not qualify. All right. And he's not. He's not. This is why Islam is so attractive to him. This is why he'll probably land up in jail for a long, long time. Let's see. Okay, Matt Walsh, those of you who don't know him, this is Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is a religious conservative. He's part of the Daily Wire. He has 2.06 million subscribers. He is one of the most articulate voices on the right. Again, he is part of Ben Shapiro's empire at the Daily Wire. And I'm going to talk about Matt Walsh on a different show, regarding his belief in public beatings. James, please, no questions under $20. Otherwise, I'll be here all night if I have to answer every $5 question. So I'm trying to minimize the number of questions now. And I'd like to, and I know we can achieve the goal, but I'd like to minimize it and get us to the goal. But with $20 questions, not $5. I appreciate all the $5 questions. I really, really do. But there's just so many of them. I won't be able to. I'll be here all night answering all these questions. So please, if you're going to ask, focus on the $20 ones. All right. So Matt Walsh is very well known. He's huge. He just commended Singapore for having some fantastic laws because they kill drug dealers. Let's be clear, Ashton. Andrew Tate has no self-respect. If you have self-respect, you don't have sex with stupid, manipulated women. It's the exact opposite of self-respect. A human being with self-respect has sex only with people who truly represent a value to him. In some dimension, he's equal. In some dimension, admirable. Who the hell wants to have sex with you can pay for that kind of sex. Who the hell wants to have sex with a bimbo who stands and represents nothing? That's not self-respect. That's you're respecting yourself in the gutter. I gave you the tweets where he says about this woman he sleeps with in London and, lies to her to get her to come to Romania and gets involved in a threesome over there and sleeps with her. But the guy has no self-esteem, no self-respect. You have to check your premises about what self-respect and what self-esteem actually mean if you think that Andrew Tate has them. He doesn't. And indeed, most people who boastful, most people who show off, most people who like to say, I'm the highest status male on the planet. That anybody who says that, it's a sign that he has no self-respect and self-esteem. He might have kind of a sense of self-confidence as a marketer, but that's not self-respect and that's not self-esteem. Confidence is not self-respect or self-esteem. And even there, the confidence is very narrow. Anybody who has to tweet about how great they are has no self-respect or self-esteem. He's just obnoxious. Indeed, I think his whole behavior is motivated, and Ayn Rand wrote about this, motivated by a lack of self-esteem, by a desire to achieve what she called the pseudo-self-esteem. All right, here is Matt Walsh. This is Matt Walsh's. So Matt Walsh has a critique of Andrew Tate that's similar to mine, although he's more sympathetic to Andrew Tate because Andrew Tate is against the left. And anything that's against the left is good. All right. I know lots of world champions and all kinds of things who lack self-esteem, particularly in a physical sport. Again, not what self-esteem is. So here's Matt Walsh. This is his, I'm not giving you his critique of Andrew Tate, although it's pretty good. I'm focusing here on his alternative.
Yes, men should reject the programming that our culture wants to subject them to.
Yep.
Programming which seeks to neuter and feminize them. Yes, they should work hard. They should take care of their minds and their bodies.
Yes.
Yes, they should strive for success, including financial success. But a life of hedonism and materialism and luxurious wealth, remaining unmarried while sleeping with dozens of different women and so on, is not the ideal to strive towards.
I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that. It's not the ideal to strive towards, and it's a recipe for a disastrous life. It's a recipe for unhappiness, and it's again motivated by a hole within you that you're trying to fill with superficiality.
Rather, what men are called to and created for, and the only sort of life that will be truly happy, that they'll find true happiness and joy in, is a life of service as
So here's the false dichotomy.
Protector and provider.
So here's the false dichotomy presented. Andrew Tate, shallow and so on, but Andrew Tate represents here man seeking his own desires, man seeking his own self-interest, man doing what's good for himself. And that is bad, says religion, says Matt Walsh, says conventional morality. What he really should be seeking, is service. It's altruism. It's service to others. And indeed, the definition of masculinity is protecting others, serving others. That's the essence of masculinity for Matt Walsh. And when you have this version, and you have the left saying it's all toxic, don't be a man, then what you're left with is, well, I'll just be a hedonistic nihilist. By the way, Ashton, I don't believe that everyone who's not an objectivist doesn't have self-esteem. I think a lot of people out there have self-esteem. Steve Jobs had self-esteem. Steve Jobs, I think, had real self-esteem. I think a lot of businessmen have a lot of self-esteem. I think Andrew Tate has no self-esteem, has negative self-esteem. So Andrew Tate is rejecting the altruism that Matt Walsh presents, but instead of adopting a self-interest consistent with human nature, a self-interest anchored in reason and rationality, he adopts a, hedonistic nihilism that is just self-destructive. What's bad? What's wrong with existential nihilism? It's destructive. It's the end of civilization. It leads to the destruction of your own life. It leads to having a horrible, pathetic existence. It lacks happiness, and it's destructive to human life. That is, you cannot build a civilization around it, and you cannot build a life around it. It's in every dimension, both as an individual and a societal level, it's destructive. That's the problem with it. Steve Jobs rejected part of his family. It wasn't the fact that he was rich that gave him a self-esteem. Just watch videos of him. He had pride. He had confidence. He had understanding. He was a man of the mind. Ashton, Ayn Rand explicitly wrote about Andrew Tate-like people and specifically said they don't have self-esteem. And I should have got the quote from her, but we can probably find it. Let's see if we can. Here we go. Here's a quote from Ayn Rand that relates to this, right? Sex is one of the most important aspects of man's life, and therefore must never be approached lightly or casually. A sexual relationship is proper only on the ground of the highest values one can find in a human being. Sex must not be anything other than a response to values. And that is why I consider promiscuity immoral. Not because sex is evil, but because sex is too good and too important. Now, let me see where, because I know there is, let me see if I can find the section on self-esteem. Here we go. The man who despises himself, tries to gain self-esteem from sexual adventures, which can't be done because sex is not the cause but the effect and the expression of a man's sense of his own value. The man who thinks that wealth comes from material resources and has no intellectual root or meaning are the men who think, for the same reason, that sex is a physical capacity which functions independently of one's mind, choice, or code of values. They think that your body creates a desire and makes a choice for you just about in the same such way as if iron ore transformed itself into railroad rails of its own volition. Love is blind, they say. Sex is impervious to reason and mocks the power of all philosophers. But in fact, a man's sexual choice is the result of the sum of his fundamental convictions. Tell me what a man finds sexually attractive, and I will tell you his entire philosophy of life. Show me the woman he sleeps with, and I will tell you his valuation of himself. That's good. Show me the woman he sleeps with, and I will tell you his valuation of himself. What does that say about Andrew Tate, given the women he sleeps with? No matter what corruption he's taught about the virtue of selflessness, Sex is the most profoundly selfish of all acts, an act which he cannot perform for only any motive but his own enjoyment. Just try to think of performing it in a spirit of selfless charity, an act which is not possible in self-abasement, only in self-exaltation, only in the confidence of being desired and being worthy of desire. It is an act that forces him to stand naked in spirit as well as in body and to accept his real ego as a standard of value. He will always be attracted to the woman who reflects his deepest vision of himself, the woman whose surrender permits him to experience or to fake a sense of self-esteem. Fake a sense of self-esteem. That's Andrew. Love is our response to our highest values and can be nothing else. I'm not quoting her as the authority, but since Ashton, was claiming that Ayn Rand would not call for it, here it is. No, I'm not saying that anybody's an objectivist does not self-esteem. Again, I'm saying that people like Andrew Tate who sleep with women who have no objective value, have no mind, that are nothing, have no self-esteem. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying that he doesn't have self-esteem. He has a measure of self-confidence in a particular context, but he has no self-respect. And you can't, without self-respect, you can't have self-esteem. Self-esteem is not just about confidence. It's about more than that. And if you read Ayn Rand, did James Taggart have self-esteem, even though he ran a railroad and was CEO and dealt with politicians and was in all the highest realms of so-called power and everything? No, Ayn Rand rejects the idea that he had anything like self-esteem. Anyway, this is for a show on self-esteem, and we can ask. I mean, it would be a good topic to ask Gina about self-esteem. Who has self-esteem and what self-esteem constitutes? So note the kind of juxtaposition. You can either serve, be a protector and a husband. The only option is get married or sleep around. And have kids, get married, have kids, have a family, serve. All of those notions of masculinity are wrong. Wrong. And in the 21st century, whatever definition we come up with for masculinity has to take into account, well, in any time, the world of the mind, one's competence. And yes, there is a sense in which the masculine is the physical. There is a sense in which masculinity is linked to testosterone. But how that is, that's what needs to be worked out. But it's certainly not about either sleeping around or leading a conventional married life of sacrifice and selflessness. Thomas says marriage is failing on every metric. What marriage is failing on every metric? My marriage is not failing on every metric. God. Some of this is strange. All right, let's see. I could do more on Matt Walsh, but I'm going to stop here because it is getting late, and we'll probably be dealing with Matt Walsh on other topics soon, and we can refer back to this. I do know that I owe some movie reviews and some TV reviews. I will get to those soon, and I will get to those in an episode very soon. All right, let's go back to, first let me say, please, $20 questions or more. We've just got 1 million questions right now. And I'm going to go over the $20 questions right now and see which ones are related to the topic, and I'll take those first. Then we'll do the other $20 questions, then we'll get to the $10 questions and $5 questions. But from now on, $20 questions or more only. But let's start with Ashton, who asked a question for $100. Well, I'm going to wait with that one just because it's not on topic. Let me start with Michael, just because it's on Matt Walsh. I could not believe that Matt Walsh video responding to Kyle Kuklinski, he outright admitted to wanting a Christian fascist dictatorship. These conservatives are dangerous. They seem reasonable in attacking woke, but they are just as tyrannical. Yes, I've been telling you this for years now. They are just as tyrannical. They seem reasonable. But when it comes to what they really want, I mean, Matt Walsh has complimented Singapore for executing drug dealers. He's complimenting Singapore for beating prisoners, all kinds of prisoners in public. Public floggings is one he wants to return to. This is real barbarism. This is what we had 300, 400 years ago. He also claims the family is at the center of civilization and women having kids and men and women staying together and being monogamous. Well, we had that 500 years ago and we didn't have civilization. We had that 1,000 years ago and we didn't have civilization. We had that 2,000 years ago. And in some places we had civilization, other places we didn't. Maybe civilization is not tied to families. Maybe family is not what defines civilization. I mean, this conservative nonsense is truly nonsense. And it's in many ways barbaric. All right, also, Michael. No, let me do this. Daniel. Tate's associates in the manosphere or red pill community have similar views on masculinity and femininity. Determinism, materialism, zero-sum thinking seem to be the fundamental systems of rationalization for lack of self-esteem. I agree completely. I mean, the whole manosphere, red pill, is again a bunch of pseudo self-esteem people. It is driven by a certain genetic determinism. There is no respect for the mind. There is no respect for the individual. We're treated as lumps of flesh and nothing more than that. This is why you can have sex with whomever. And it means nothing, and it symbolizes nothing, and it represents nothing, and it's pretty sad. It's a pretty sad reflection on our world that these are the kind of attitudes. These are the kind of attitudes that we have towards femininity, masculinity, and sex. And it is driven by a materialism and a determinism in our culture. Determinism, i.e., we're just material, we're just atoms, and it's all predetermined. So anything you do goes. There is no choice. There is no fundamental spiritual essence of being human beings. I think casual sex once in a while, not as the system of life, is fine. Is it the be-all, end-all? No. It's just okay. It can be enjoyable, and you move on. But if you take sex seriously and you take your life seriously and you have self-esteem, i.e. you value yourself, not just you deeply respect yourself, you value yourself, then you don't just give it up to anybody. Whether you're a man or female, doesn't matter. It's funny though, if a woman sleeps around, we call her a slut. If a man sleeps around, ooh, that's cool. And they have self-esteem, but the woman, she's a slut. All of that is bullshit. Women can have self-esteem and sleep with more than one guy, and a guy can have self-esteem and choose to sleep only with one woman. The whole attitude towards sex is bizarre in the 21st century. Men are seeking, seem to be seeking a 300, going backwards 300 years, and women, seem to be abolishing, desiring the abolishment of sex altogether. All right, let's see. Dave says, on a more benevolent note about masculinity is, whoops, I skipped that. There we go. Where's Dave? There's Dave. All right, on a more benevolent note about masculinity, this is $200. Good for Dave. I had an email exchange with Chris Hadfield, the former commander of the International Space Station. That's cool. I told him his use of language and sense of life is like that of an Ayn Rand hero, and that he would absolutely love reading Ayn Rand. Yeah, I mean, I don't know Chris Hadfield, but the former commander of the International Space Station sounds like a pretty cool, pretty masculine job that combines both physical command of your environment and heavy use of your brain and your intellect and your mind. So that sounds like the perfect combination, masculine combination. Yeah, I mean, the fact that he might be an Ayn Rand hero is terrific. Good job. Let's see. James says, I think the issue with people like Tate and others exerting energy to compensate for an inferiority complex, I agree, he's got an inferiority complex, know somewhere in their mind that they have evaded and their subconscious can't and won't let it go. Yeah, well, it's a question of where the inferiority complex comes from, and that's a psychological question. But yes, I'm sure there's an evasion there somewhere, and that is partially responsible for their state. Andrew asks, what do the romantic relationships of Ayn Rand's novel show us to be healthy causes of sexual chemistry? I think in Ayn Rand's novels, the sexual chemistry comes from a deep sense of efficaciousness, of competence, of confidence and valuing and success. But a deep just efficaciousness of competence. And that's what I think Ayn Rand's heroes respond to sexually. It's what I think, a strength of character. We don't talk about character enough. But don't you want to sleep with a woman who has character rather than a woman who has none? Don't you as a woman want to sleep with a man of character, moral character? I think that's what her heroes respond to. They respond to the productiveness, they respond to the reason and rationality, they respond to the strength and the commitment and the values, the rational values that the heroes exhibit. The commitment to reality, the commitment to the truth. All of that is part of what makes those romantic relationships work. All right, let's just go through these. Here's one from Casey. In light of the Epstein case, what do you expect to come of this prosecution? Would you speak about the other people who are still culpable in Epstein's inner circle and now Tate's? Well, I don't know how many people are culpable within Tate's circle. I don't know much about the circle, if you will. But certainly I did a whole show on Epstein. I did more than one show on Epstein. This is Jeffrey Epstein. I think that I don't know. Are you talking about which Epstein are you talking about? The one with the island or the one in Hollywood? I mean, both are horrible, but clearly the one on the island is worse, and we know a lot more about it. It is really horrific that not more of the names of people who molested young girls and young women in Jeffrey Epstein's island and estate and so on have been prosecuted. It is truly horrific. Oh, the other guy's Weinstein, that's right. The other guy's Weinstein. But Epstein, it seems like it's him and the one, I forget the name of the woman who helped him, and it's ended. And, years are going to go by and we hear nothing about it. But why isn't there more being done, given the horrors of what Jeffrey Epstein and his cadre of assistants, women and men, and all the men that, he facilitated for them, sex with underage women? What about Ghislaine and everybody else? And why aren't there deep investigations into their responsibility and culpability in everything that happened? It seems like Money has bought a lot of people their freedom, money and power and influence. This is the case, certainly the case for, what's his name, the royal, but I'm sure this is the case of a lot of people who fear their name and their being disclosed. But I get a sense that nobody cares. That's part of the problem. Nobody really cares. Everybody's gone on. And by the standards of Andrew Tate, he's just a man trying to sleep around. What's wrong with that? And women are just things to be commanded. They just have to. So these powerful people are not being brought to justice. And I think that's sick and sad and pathetic. And it tells us a lot about the nature of justice in our society, the fact that these people are not being prosecuted and not being gone after. If they committed financial crimes, they'd get them like that. They'd get them like that. But sexual crimes, strong, powerful men, that's fine. It's sad. John Bowles says, I take a small amount of pride in the fact that I have no idea who Andrew Tate person is. I did too. I did not know who he was for a long time. Only recently did I discover him, unfortunately. But, I'm a cultural commentator, so I have to know about these things. You guys pay me to know about this stuff and to expose you to them. All right, Ashton says, do you think that the events of the 20th century, let me just say something, Ashton, because you remind me of the events of the 20th century. Let me just give you some other examples of people I think who had no self-esteem. Hitler, Stalin, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. I think most politicians have no self-esteem, almost all of them. But I think a lot of scientists have self-esteem. I think a lot of business people have self-esteem. So it's not that I think all non-objectivists have no self-esteem, but politicians generally, but certainly dictators. Putin's another example of a man with no self-esteem. No self-esteem. Lenin, you could add all the authoritarian thugs out there don't have self-esteem. So, I mean, it's a different way of viewing what self-esteem actually means. These people are also deeply unhappy human beings. Deeply unhappy human beings. All right, Ashton asks, do you think that the events of the 20th century, like European colonialism, World War I, the rise of fascism and communism, World War II, and the Holocaust, left European civilization in a state of nihilism like it is today? Has Western civilization become soulless because of it? That's a great question. Okay, so let me step back and try to really walk us through this. I certainly think that the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century, was a slap in the face of what made the West great. I mean, this would be an entire show. Let me copy this, and I'll give you the quick answer now, but it deserves of an entire show because it is a really, really good question. And by the way, colonialism maybe is in a slightly different category here. But I think the 19th century was an awakening of a certain spirit in humanity that in some senses humanity had never had before. Maybe short periods in Greece and in Roman history, but really humanity had never experienced before. It was the expression of the Enlightenment. It was an expression of freedom, and it was an expression of freedom and an expression of individualism and an expression of the efficacy of the human mind. It was this beautiful success story. It had a lot of ugliness associated with it. It had a lot of bad things going on at the same time. This is also the rise of nationalism and racism and all kinds of other things. But the essential characteristic for humanity, the 19th century, was this magnificent expression of the Enlightenment. And again, individualism and reason, individualism and the efficacy of the human mind as expressed in human life on a global, or not global, but on a large scale. But it was never completely completely solidified because the Enlightenment was weak. The Enlightenment had never solidified the set of ideas that made the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, capitalism possible. It was always built on, in a sense, a house of quicksand. The Enlightenment had not fundamentally challenged altruism. The Enlightenment had not, at the end of the day, fundamentally challenged faith and religion. The Enlightenment had not provided us with a theory, grounding of reason and egoism and the pursuit of happiness. They gave us an indication, a direction, and that was enough to create the greatest advancement in human history. And at the same time, see, I don't see it as existential, Ashton. I see it as ideological and existential at the same time. So we'll get to the existential issues. And at the same time, opposition to the Enlightenment immediately arose. And you see that throughout the 19th century in Kant, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Marx, Nietzsche, all reject the Enlightenment, all reject reason, all reject individualism in one form or another. And as a consequence of that rejection, as a consequence of the move away from reason and individualism, we got the First World War. And I think the First World War was, of all the wars, the most traumatic. I think it was more traumatic than the Second. I think it was more traumatic than communism. Because the First World War shattered the belief in reason. It shattered the belief in individualism. It shattered the West's confidence in itself. It shattered their belief in absolute values and in positive values. It shattered their belief in the Enlightenment. Indeed, the rise of fascism and communism come out of World War I. It's not an accident. Communism is, for the first time, successful during World War I in Russia, and grows as a consequence of the disaster and horrors of World War I. It shatters the confidence of the British and ultimately results in the complete, destruction of the empire. It shatters Europe. It sets Germany up for World War II and, of course, the Holocaust. And I think what we're left with in the post-World War II era is a situation where much of the best parts, or almost all of the best parts of the world we live in today is still animated by this weak sense of the Enlightenment, by this weak, still exists, respect for the Enlightenment, for individualism and reason. It still lingers from back then, but weakened dramatically by the events of the first half of the 20th century. But much stronger than that is an ongoing beat of those things that are posed, whether it's religion, whether it's communism, whether it's total subjectivism, whether it's nationalism, all those things that rejected, all those ideologies that rejected the Enlightenment, all those ideologies that were anti-man, anti-individualism, anti-reason, they're all there. And when one looks and sees the Enlightenment in decline, the Enlightenment's being weakened, can't take it too seriously, and yet the alternative is communism. Well, that's failed. Fascism, that failed. There is no idealism. All idealism is gone. And what people are left with, I think what some people are left with, is nihilism. And that's the soulless nature of Western civilization. It's because it's rejected its roots in the Enlightenment. It's because it's rejected, yes, no absolutes. It's because it's rejected reason and individualism, that it has nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. And it is stuck. So it's what has it got? It's got Andrew Tate. No absolutes in Andrew Tate. 2 + 2 = 5 if I say so. And it's got Matt Walsh. No absolute in Matt Walsh. Whatever God says is absolute. And then you've got the left, which is completely postmodern, has given up on reality completely. So you've got all the alternatives that are available to human beings have given up on reality. So, of all of those, I guess some people find Andrew Tate's, the kind of the nihilism, the hedonism, as, I don't know, the least offensive, maybe. Although I think they're the most offensive, but they seem to be the least offensive. But it is. They're stuck with this nihilism. They're stuck, and I think most of society is not nihilistic. I think most society is just depressed. Society is just low energy. Society's, in that sense, it's anti-masculine. I think masculinity equals energy. There's something about masculinity that's associated with energy. They're stuck with depression. They're stuck with passivity. They're stuck with going nowhere. Because there's no absolute, there's no reality, there's no truth, there's no goodness, there's no happiness, there's no objective standards. And again, and I will do a whole show on this because it's the actual sequence of events, the transition between World War I and World War II. All of the history is really interesting and important. Okay, Michael asks, on his show, Steven Crowder just said there are a lot of secular humanists in Hollywood and in conservative media with Jewish last names who've written exploitative contracts. Yeah, right. We always thought the anti-Semitism was on the left, but the right is mainstreaming it fast. No, I never thought it was on the left. Anti-Semitism is everywhere. It's on the left and it's on the right. It's historically been on the right. It's everywhere. And yes, this idea that Jewish people and Jewish media are writing contracts that exploit people, really, because these people are idiots, these people are stupid. How many gazillionaires have, quote, Jewish agents created and made and helped promote? How many producers of Jewish origin have created massive movies and studios and anyway, it's unbelievable that Steven Crowder would say that, and I guess maybe this is part of his lashing out against Ben Shapiro because he feels like they only offered him $50 million and he's worth a lot more than that. How come nobody offers me $50 million? I guess I need to change some of my views. Hopper Campbell says, how can you argue our lack of understanding of free will is like our lack of understanding of gravity? We have some understanding of gravity. There's hard science there, whereas free will, all we have is introspection. Well, okay, so you could argue that free will is in the status of gravity before we had that understanding of its physics. I don't know enough physics to say that we have any kind of physics. So Newton has no understanding of gravity, of the causes of gravity. All he could do is identify it and say it exists. That's exactly the same thing with free will. So we're not at a more advanced level than Newton was. Our understanding of free will is no better than Newton's understanding of gravity. That's not a bad place to be. So, free will is an evident part of reality that we can't understand from a physical perspective. Fine, so what? It's a self-evident part of reality. As you know, we know that because we are the agents of free will. Liam says, to what extent does the irrational, unpredictable propaganda by modern philosophy responsible for bipolar disorder? It seems these impulsive mood swings must come from some sort of disintegrated epistemology. I don't know. I'm not an expert at this. So I don't like, as I said, Leonard Peikoff had a talk where he explains at least some of the psychological disorders in terms of epistemology and philosophy. I think generally that having a bad philosophy and a culture and having bad epistemology culture increases the occurrences of psychological problems or psychological issues. But I don't think it's the only cause, and I don't know that it's the primary cause. There's certainly issue of chemical imbalances. There's certainly issues where there's some things that are outside of our control that impact us. It could also be stuff that we observed as kids, but certainly we don't have full control over every aspect of our mind. And in that sense, bipolar could certainly be a consequence of disintegrated epistemology or caused by something external. But I do think the prevalence of these kind of issues is a consequence of bad philosophy. It's hard to measure it because we've always had bad philosophy. There's nothing unique about modern times. Modern philosophy is bad, but so is old philosophy. It's not like religion is a good philosophy. It's not like there was good philosophy 400 years ago. But that's a good question also to ask Gina Gorlin, right? She's in this, right? The Godfather asked, I saw a Soho Forum debate about ending the Fed. I got lost in some of the details, mainly the historical and international comments. Could you comment on the debate? It was between Fredrick Mishkin, former governor, Fed, and Larry White. I haven't seen the debate, so I can't comment on it. I'll look for it and see how, what I can comment about it. But generally, I would be on Larry White's side. I think Larry White is absolutely is excellent on issues of the history of the Fed and understands the disaster that is the Federal Reserve. But I'm not surprised that economists got bogged down on details rather than on a principled case against central planning. Central planning is bad morally and practically. And the Federal Reserve is a case of central planning. Michael says, would you say people like Hitler and Putin are mentally ill or sane and just evil, or is evil only a feature of the mental intellect? I would say they're evil, insane. They might also evil and insane. I don't know, but I don't think it's meaningful if you then qualify every evil person as an insane person. I think they're evil and insane. I think evil is a category. It's a category of evasive that leads people to doing horrible, horrific things. Leonard Peikoff has a lecture where he talks about different levels of evil, and he discusses this in greater detail. You might want to look for that. Degrees of Evil, maybe, is the name, or maybe that's in the description. You can probably find it on YouTube. Liam says, are there any geniuses alive today like Newton or Ayn Rand, or has our mixed economy crushed them? When we achieve a fully free world, will we see geniuses like Ayn Rand pop up every decade or so? So I definitely think there probably are geniuses like Newton and Ayn Rand out there. They, unfortunately, because our culture has so encouraged people to specialize, they're probably super specialized on something. I certainly don't think Elon Musk is a genius of the caliber of Ayn Rand or Isaac Newton. But, he might be. I don't know. But, I think what made Ayn Rand unique is the scope. To be a genius in philosophy is extraordinarily rare. But that's because most geniuses go into very narrow fields like mathematics or physics. But, I don't know. I will say this. There's no question that good societies, you suddenly see a flourishing of geniuses. And you can see that. The best example I know of that is the Renaissance. Pre-Renaissance, how many names of people do you have pre-Renaissance? Of geniuses, of great minds. Almost nobody. Dante, maybe, right? But in the same geographic area, in Florence, starting in, I don't know, around 1400 or 1450 or something around there, suddenly, there's just these amazing geniuses. Some of them we all know from Galileo. Galileo is late, but Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and those are just the most visible and well known, but all the ones who led up to them, just hundreds of geniuses. I went to the cemetery in Florence, tiny little town. Little town. And just, Machiavelli, and the what do you call it? The rulers of Venice at the time, the rulers of Florence at the time, the Medici family. I mean, there were these amazing human beings, all proof out of nowhere. Same town that produced nothing before suddenly produces dozens of amazing human beings, of what you would consider geniuses of their time. So culture, education, culture, and freedom, even relative freedom, produce genius. And it's just proof that it's not all about the genes, because the genes in the pool in Florence didn't change. Radu Chudu Koman. Restating an earlier question from Liam, is the prevalence of tattoos a sign of nihilistic times? Why are people ruining their bodies with ink? It seems disgusting, especially in beautiful women. I agree. I don't get it. I think it's horrible. I think it really is horrible. Tattoos, I think, are again a form of self-mutilation, again a sign of lack of self-esteem, not a sign of self-esteem, a lack of self-respect. It just seems horrible, and many of the tattoos are kind of dark. This is not any kind of celebration and positive thing. So I'm not a big fan of tattoos at all. I don't like it. Body paint is fine. I mean, body paint, you can paint yourself in different ways for a particular occasion, for a particular party, and then you wash it off. The thing about tattoos is they're permanent. They're there forever. It's not just a game. It's not just something not just a temporary decoration or something. This is forever, and you're making decisions about the rest of your life by having a tattoo. And they're big, and they cover large quantities of the body. And again, they're usually dark or aggressive. Or, again, I think a form of barbarism. I mean, tattoos were things that warriors in, Bronze Age type people use. So I'm not a fan of tattoos. Theme has to ask, what are the roots of anti-Semitism? Were Jews hated before World War II? Well, of course, Jews have always been hated. I mean, the roots of anti-Semitism is hatred of the other. Hatred of the other that looks different, that worships a different God, that lives isolated from you. In a world of faith and mysticism, the other represents the unknowable cause of bad stuff that's happening all around you. By the way, we're at like $908 raised. How about we make it to 1,000? We haven't done $1,000 in one show in a while. So given that we're going on 2 hours, another $100, we could do that. I think that's doable. So the roots of anti-Semitism have to do with otherism, with the fact that the other is scary, with the fact that other is easy to blame for all your problems. I think the other is a big part of it. Add to that the whole mythology of Jews having responsible for the death of Jesus. Christianity had kind of at some point built into it this idea of hating the Jews for killing Jesus, which was just an excuse, I think, for the otherism, for the hatred of another tribe, for hatred of people who won't adopt your so-called universal religion, hatred for the fact that they are not with you, that they separate themselves from you. As a consequence of that, all kinds of conspiracy theories arose, from poisoning the locals to drinking babies' blood to all kinds of things. Of course, their rituals were different than yours, so it was easy to make them out as horrible people. And then as you get into the Middle Ages, their success. Jews were very successful. They were the money lenders. I have a whole essay about money lenders and how the fact that Jews were the money lenders led to more anti-Semitism. Jews were allowed to lend money. Christians were not, for reasons that I tell in the essay. You can find it in my book on the moral case for finance, which I highly recommend. Richard, thank you. Wow. Bringing us much closer to the $1,000. So all of those lead to the anti-Semitism of World War II. But yes, anti-Semitism begins basically with the beginning of Christianity and is around, has been around since then. And World War II is just one crescendo in many crescendos. I mean, the Russians killed Jews in large numbers, the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Poles, during the 19th century. It's why so many Jews left Europe and immigrated to the United States and elsewhere around the world. They were persecuted for anti-Semitism in France in the 19th century, in Germany in the 19th century. Jews during the 17th century, were put into ghettos to be separate from everybody else because people didn't want to mix with them, so they had to live, and the gates of the ghetto were locked every night by the Christians. They kept them in the ghetto overnight so that, God forbid, the Jews wouldn't do anything to them. So, no, anti-Semitism goes back a long time. All right, Richard says, I hate the U.S. immigration system. Yeah, join the club. My girlfriend is applying for H-1B, and she's accepted. She'll have to pay $6,000 for the privilege of staying here. She only had a 20% chance of getting it. Otherwise, she will have to go back to Korea. I mean, it's just horrible. It's just horrible. I mean, it's one thing to pay $6,000 for staying here. You know, I can think of worse things. But going back to Korea, I mean, I'm sure your girlfriend is talented and productive. And what is it? Why don't we want it? I mean, the immigration system in the United States is complete and utter trash. It's horrific. It's despicable. And you can't talk to people about it. You can't talk to people about it because, God forbid, you know, you advocate for more immigration, much more immigration, huge, humongously more immigration, and making it super easy to immigrate to the United States. But people freak out when you say that. I still owe you guys a show on immigration. We'll do it. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Okay, here we go. We've got a lot of $5 to $10 questions, so we're going to do these fast. Liam says, were you always obsessed with persuasion growing up? That has been my issue since I discovered objectivism. I may come across as too nerdy to convince people of the truth. No, I don't think so. I mean, I was always interested in the truth. I was always interested in ideas. I was always interested in, I was always interested in that, but I don't know that I was always interested in persuasion. I think that came, I mean, when I discovered objectivism, I wanted to argue with everybody around me. But even that gave way. I think that focus on persuasion came later as I discovered my love of teaching. James says, 80% of millionaires in the U.S. never inherited any wealth. Is that the case in Europe and Israel, or is it mostly intergenerational wealth? In Europe, I think the percentage of intergenerational wealth is much higher. In Israel, it's probably even lower than the U.S. Israel, there was nothing to inherit. So in Israel was a poor country once, not that long ago. So almost all the wealth, all the rich people in Israel are self-made rich, self-made millionaires and billionaires. So Israel's probably more than the United States. Europe, more of the aristocracy of old wealth, much more of that, because there was wealth in the old aristocracy. Also, there's a lot of wealth in land in Europe, and people who owned land a long time ago have made a lot of money off of that. So that's more inherited wealth. Richard says, are you afraid that there will be another wave of persecution against Jews in the West? People like Tucker and Corbyn are saying really scary things, and I've even heard people on Fox making anti-Semitic innuendos. Yeah, I mean, I think I am scared. I still don't think it'll happen in the U.S., but it is definitely possible that it could happen in the U.S. I do think that as the U.S. descends and moves away from civilization, one of the phenomena that always happens is a rise in anti-Semitism. So as we move away from reason and we move away from individualism, and we become more racist as a society, racism both left and right, anti-Semitism will rise, and it definitely is something that I worry about, and I think everybody should be worried about. One of the things that motivates me in what I do. I think that would be horrific, because whether I consider myself a Jew or not, whether my kids don't even know what being a Jew means, they have no conception of it. It doesn't matter, because the anti-Semites will always consider all of us Jews. It's based on our grandparents. It's the Hitler test, right? If your grandparents were Jews, you're Jewish. So we're all victims of this anti-Semitism, potentially victims. I worry about both left and right here in terms of, and I'm seeing the right become more explicit, much more explicit than they used to be. Michael, can Christianity and religion in general not last forever because repressing emotions always leads to backlash, like sexual deviancy? Well, they've lasted 2,000 years. I'm not sure what that means. I don't think Christianity will last. I don't think it'll last because it's false. And I think, therefore, the truth will win out. The truth will come out, and people will reject Christianity because it's just false. I think that's enough. Cook, Matt Walsh made a Pega University video years ago about how self-esteem is as real as unicorns. Yes, I remember that. Matt Walsh claimed self-esteem just doesn't exist. He's not against self-esteem. He's not for self-esteem. There just isn't a thing called self-esteem. But one of the problems with that video is he defines self-esteem the way the left does, as giving a ribbon to anybody. The way you instill self-esteem is just by giving ribbons to everybody. I think, by the way, Matt Walsh has more self-esteem than Andrew Tate, because Matt Walsh has a set of values he's committed to. I still don't think he has much, but he has more, because he has some real values. Andrew Tate has none. Richard says, do you think our immigration system, by the way, we've reached $1,000, so thank you, Richard, who's almost single-handedly brought us there, together with MH08 and Bash Bannigan. Do you think our immigration system is deliberately designed to be racist? I don't like using that as a go-to argument, but the insane complexity and obscurity. Do you think the immigration system is deliberately designed to be racist? I don't think. Well, I mean, this is the thing about it. It was originally, all immigration restrictions in the United States were designed to be racist, originally. So the first immigration law in the United States was designed to keep out Chinese. And you could broaden it to keep out Asians, but it was primarily targeted at Chinese, because the Chinese were taking labor away from the Irish and others. There was a big backlash against the Chinese who were building the railroads, right? God forbid. And then the immigration laws of the 1920s basically stopped immigration. And with almost, there was very little immigration allowed. And then when immigration was allowed, there was a clear emphasis to allow in Europeans and not allow in Mexicans and Asians and others. And that's from the 1920s until 1965. But not Jews, for example. But you know, good white Europeans, non-Jewish white Europeans. That's what the immigration system in the 1920s. The progressives, like Wilson, was super, super racist. And this is why I say racism is not gone from our society, because, you know, it's all over the place. And it was in our immigration laws. So then in the 60s, there was a backlash against that as part of the civil rights movement. And therefore, what they did was they created this family reunification program, which has turned out to be massively beneficial to, you know, to Hispanic immigrants, and less beneficial to Europeans. And there was an effort to suppress European immigration, or to at least reduce it, and to suppress and to make it a more level playing field. And that's why you got a lot of Asians, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of non-whites immigrating post 1968. But again, it was all kind of motivated in this time in a little bit of a reverse by racial issues. And again, it was the wrong immigration debate. It wasn't about work. It wasn't about producing. It was about just families. And now there's, of course, all this, humanitarian stuff and asylum and all of that. So we've never had, since the first anti-immigration law, which was 1890-something, we haven't had good immigration law. The original immigration to the United States, which allowed Chinese in, allowed all Europeans in, pretty much allowed anybody in. It was complete open immigration in much of the 19th century. That was the right immigration policy. And that went away starting in the 1890s for racist reasons. Racism is a much bigger part of the American story than a lot of people would like to admit. And that's why I suspect that it's a bigger part of our present than most people would like to admit. Jacob says, unobjective, immoral, unethical to recommend COVID vaccines to pregnant, zero long-term studies, long-term risk and unknown, pregnant, excluded from trials, thermopylae only pulled after 3 years. I don't believe that's true, Jacob. I can pull the research and look into it. We now have, I suspect, millions of pregnant women who've been vaccinated. We know what the consequences are. We can pull the studies and see what the consequences are. I know, for example, at least one woman who was very scientifically educated, who got vaccinated, but I can pull the studies on the millions of women who've now been vaccinated, and my suspicion, strong suspicion, is that it's fine. It's fine. Michael says, have you ever evaded in your life? What made you uncomfortable enough that you wanted to reject those relevant facts from your awareness? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've evaded. I remember evading before I read Objectivism with regard to ethics, with regard to the fact that altruism was untenable, but I couldn't conceive of an alternative. So I basically decided not to look there and just accept altruism by default. That was an evasion, but I'm sure I've evaded in other circumstances. But the thing about evading is you've got to make up for it by refocusing and making up for it by making amends, by figuring out what it was and correcting yourself and fixing it. Right? So if you evade and let it stay, that's when it does damage. If you evade, you still get damaged. There's no free lunch in the world. But if you correct for it, if you adjust for it, if you understand it, and you fix it, then I think you're fine. Robert Nasser, these are the same types who despise individualism unless it's presented as rugged individualism. Small wonder that Tate thinks a woman's and his primary virtues are charisma and being hot. Yes, I agree completely. The Godfather, I would love to get a review of Ted Lasso, a show I truly enjoyed. I think you may like it too. I really enjoyed Ted Lasso. I did review it. I reviewed the first season, which I thought was better, the best of the seasons. Yeah, it's super benevolent, super positive, super American, pro-American. Very, very unusual. Usually shows about an American going to Europe always make fun of the American, always are cynical, always undermine the American, always, and this one, like, the American is a good guy. And his positivity and optimism and naivete are all presented as positives, of good things, as virtues. So I'm a big fan of Ted Lasso. Wesley Lopez, you've spoken out against pornography, but doesn't it exalt the human form? No, I think photography of the nude and painting and sculpture of the nude exalt the human form. I think sculpture and painting of nudes are magnificent. I even think photography and of the nude is amazing. And I'm not completely rejecting of pornography. I think there's some value in pornography. Certain types of pornography. I think people can learn about sex from pornography. I think pornography can educate us about what's possible in sex. I'm not sure about the people who do the pornography, but in terms of the people, in terms of actually viewing pornography, I'm not against it. And I think in a repressed society in which people don't know much about sex, in which we don't educate people about sex, in which we found sex to be offensive, we don't have a Kama Sutra like the Indians do. Our closest we have to Kama Sutra is pornography, and so consume it and learn from it, and it can stimulate. It can stimulate you in ways that are interesting and provocative, and in ways in which you hopefully can then bring into the bedroom. Because I'm all for sex generally, and if you can find ways in which to enhance your experience in the bedroom, then go for it, right? I think people are obsessed with it. I think some pornography is super ugly. I think the obsession with pornography is ugly, but I don't think consuming pornography is necessarily bad. I think for many people it is, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. Many men use it as to replace their lack of a relationship. And no surprise if they follow Andrew Tate that they have no relationships. Oh, and what does a board of directors do, and how are they chosen? I know publicly traded companies are chosen by stock owners, but ARI also has one. A board of directors basically oversees the company. It oversees the actions of the executive team, of the CEO. It appoints the CEO. It approves, typically approves budgets. It approves strategy. It doesn't do strategy, but it approves strategy. So the board of directors is responsible for approving strategy, and a board of directors is responsible for choosing a CEO. It's not responsible for managing a company. It's not responsible for, but it's responsible for kicking out a CEO that doesn't do his job. It's responsible for replacing CEOs. It's responsible for challenging the CEO strategy. It's responsible for making sure that the organization pursues its mission and is consistent with its values. For a nonprofit, there is a founding board, which is usually part of its charter, and then the board is self-perpetuating. The board should be a representative, should represent the interests of the donors, of the people who contribute to the charity. But the board nominates itself. It has a process. Every board has a set of rules which govern it. Any donor can ask for those. Any contributor can ask for those and make sure that they want to still support the organization. And basically, the board is self-perpetuating in the sense that it nominates new directors to replace the directors and the board can then nominate new directors, can kick out directors, can force directors out. Although it's hard, very hard to force a director out. It's not easy. But a board of a nonprofit does the same, its responsibility is the same as for a for-profit. And a for-profit, the board is technically appointed by shareholders. They vote on him, but the nominees, the people suggested to the shareholders, are all suggested by the board itself. So again, there's a sense in which it's self-perpetuating. Is the prevalence of tattoo a sign of nihilistic times? Why are people ruining their body? Oh, we just did that. That was Liam. I guess that was a question off of Liam's. Tazy says, Yaron, you're rocking the social commentary this week, epitomized in tonight's Tate commentary. Keep going. Thank you, Tazy. Hopefully this will get viewership, subscribers, and everything else up, although it might cause people to unsubscribe. Because a certain percentage of my subscribers don't like my social commentary. Hopper Campbell, did you have your doubts about Alex Epstein when you first brought him on board? Why would you ask a question like that? Or did you know he was going to be super successful? I obviously thought he was going to be, I don't know for certain whether people are going to be super successful. I thought he was going to be super successful because that's why I hired him, because I thought he was smart, and otherwise I wouldn't have hired him. I don't hire people who I don't think are going to be super successful. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. Alex was obviously super bright, super successful. There were question marks, as I'm sure there are question marks about anybody you hire. But yeah, he's done phenomenally well. I'm super proud of him. I'm super proud of the part I played in his success. The surreal truth. This backward perspective is also catching on among women on the right, even liberty types. I don't get it. Who is happy to see themselves this way? I don't know. It's weird. Candace Owen is a good example. She's weird anyway. But yes, there's a bunch of women who think this is right, going back to Bronze Age. Wesley, why do you think birth rates in Israel are higher than any other developed country, even among the secular? I've commented on this before. I think the reason is that Israel, over the last 20 years, has become a very optimistic society. It is basically has confidence. I think optimism drives childbirth. I think an optimistic people with self-esteem, people with confidence about the future have kids. People who are depressed, people who don't have, lost confidence about the future, lost their self-esteem, don't have kids. And I think that's Europe is leading the way, and I think the United States is following in just not being confident about the future. I think Asia is the same way, lack of confidence. And Israel has that. It's defeated its enemies, basically, or at least it feels that way. It's become rich. It's become successful. And there is this. But you know, even among secular Jews, they have more kids than any other country, any other developed country in the world. Michael, why has objectivism only had an influence on business but not science? Where's the objectivist Sean Carroll? I don't know who Sean Carroll is, but I don't know where the objectivist Sean Carroll is or where the objectivist great scientist is. They're out there. It's just a matter of time. It's been, I'm sure, in business, but also in engineering, and it will. Science is just rare. To be exceptional in science is rare, and there will be an objectivist who will be exceptional in science. I have no doubt about that. Gail, I think he is a very dangerous character capable of anything horrible. This is Andrew Tate. Yes, I agree. James Taylor, philosophy is not about moving words around and trying to win arguments. It's about trying to achieve happiness using a particular method. Agree. Michael, how does Ayn Rand's principle of knowledge building on knowledge and wealth building on wealth work in a highly regulated and taxed environment? Well, it's still true that your knowledge builds on other knowledge, and we still have freedom to access knowledge and build on knowledge and present our knowledge and speak our knowledge. So the knowledge is sort of building on top of each other. Wealth building on wealth is harder. It's still possible because we're still relatively free. But as you become more regulated and taxed and controlled, that process becomes harder and harder. And as capital is taxed more and more, that process becomes harder and harder. So it is a real challenge in this environment. And that principle is a principle of freedom, not a principle of authoritarianism. James Taylor, a narcissistic persona is a way of avoiding confronting what your subconscious throws at you. Yes, I think that's right. Again, a lack of self-esteem is another way of looking at it. Michael says, do you think that the vast majority of people today are insecure and inferiority complex narcissism to some degree? I don't, vast majority? I mean, there might not be narcissistic because a lot of them are inferiority complex, absolutely. But that manifests itself in a variety of different ways. I think we suffer in the world today from a massive lack of self-esteem. Massive lack of self-esteem. Massive excess of inferiority complexes. Michael, Matt Walsh and Steven Crowder are more polished versions of Nick Fuentes. That's why Nick Fuentes is becoming so popular. He's saying what they won't. He is more bold and consistent. Maybe. I don't know if Matt Walsh is an anti-Semite. I don't know if I'd say that, and a racist. I don't know. Maybe he is, but I don't know. Whereas Nick Fuentes clearly is. But yes, I think Nick Fuentes is more consistent, and Matt Walsh and the right today, the right is softening the culture up for the Nick Fuenteses of the world, and certainly Trump did that as well. Michael says, can you do a show titled In Defense of Big Tech or Big Tech are the Last American Heroes? Yes, but remember, the sponsor show is $1,000. Michael, what's the best way to feel composed and optimistic about things when you're facing real adversity? Well, to respect your mind and to know that you can deal with that adversity with logic and facts and a commitment to reality. There's no, and to know that you can overcome if you apply yourself. And that comes from that sense of self-esteem. But it's all about respecting and having confidence in your mind. Specker says, not many people answer the question why when advocating for any specific ideas. Like, why are people so adamant about supporting Christian values when those same values leave them hood? Because those values also, give them some kind of meaning, supposedly, in their life. Now, it's a false meaning, but they find it very difficult to give up that meaning. First of all, when they don't conceive of an alternative, but also when facing an alternative, they find it difficult because so much of their energy, of their soul, of their mind, of their time has been committed to these falsehoods. It's hard to give up. Yeah, and there's a real fear of the question why, because it causes them to have to think deeply about themselves, and they might not like what they find when they think deeply. MH08, thank you, really appreciate that. And Bash Brannigan asked, when did you last feel fear? I don't know. I mean, I don't generally feel a lot of fear. I mean, sometimes when there's a lot of turbulence on an airplane, I really don't like that, and I think the feeling is fear. But I generally don't feel a lot of fear. It's, the time I feel fear, and I'm not going to get too personal here, but the time I feel fear is when I have a sense that a great value of mine has the potential of being lost. So that is scary, the loss of values. Out of my control, outside of my control, by disease or illness or something like that. That is the thing that instilled more fear in me than anything else. I don't seem to feel fear when I'm attacked on stage, when people yell at me, when people need to rush the stage. I remember when Antifa attacked me, I didn't feel afraid. I think it's mainly, fear comes to me mainly when I feel like I don't have control over a loss of a really, really important value to me. All right. Thank you, everybody. Wow, long show, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Raised a lot of money. Thank you for all the super chatters. Thank you for all the people who support the show. Please like the show before you leave. We've had a lot of people watching the show who forgot to like it before they left. So please try to do that before you leave. And I will see you all tomorrow morning. Back. Yeah, there's no rest for the Yaron Brook